W5a Gathering Research and W5b Assessing Credibility are very closely linked. They both relate to how you gather the information that you'll use for your research project, making sure that you're using valid information. This is, of course, important. If you don't use valid information, everything you have to say will be questionable, so it's a good life skill to have. We'll start with W5a, Gathering Research. This particular target relates to the types of research that you gather and how you go about getting them. At the 1 level, you have limited information. In other words, you have very few sources, limited types. At the 2 level, you've got multiple sources, and they would ask for both print and digital sources, but for our purposes, most of what we do will be digital. That's okay. It also asks that you can use search terms effectively, and we'll talk about what that means. At the 3 level, you gather relevant information, so information that you actually can use for your project, not information that you will perhaps be discarding after you've written it down. Still multiple sources, still using search terms effectively. At the 4 level, the only change is that the information is most relevant. In other words, the only information that you gather is the information that you will actually use. Just some quick tips for you on this one. It's actually a fairly easy target to meet. But remember to not settle for sources with no relevant information just because you feel you need to have a certain number of sources. Keep looking. And if you're having trouble finding information, try multiple search terms. For instance, if you were looking up education, you could try teaching, education, educator, teacher preparation, and teacher. When websites are created, they get keywords set up for them, or the author of the website will set it up. And they might choose education over educator, and you may be searching for educator and totally miss a really great resource. So try those search terms. Even if you have enough information, try multiple search terms anyway. You might uncover something even better. W5b, Assessing Credibility, I think is the more important of these 2 targets. It relates to making sure that the information you use is valid information. At the 1 level, you can tell me why a source is good or not, but you don't actually use it to inform your work. In other words, you might use bad sources. I don't think any one of us is going to do that, so we'll move right along. At the 2 level, you can assess the credibility and accuracy of your sources, including assessing the strengths and limitations of each source. But you might have some inconsistencies, so maybe the reasons that you give me for why they're good or bad aren't the most logical. At the 3 level, you can assess the credibility and accuracy of each source, including its strengths and limitations, in terms of task, purpose, and audience. And I'm going to give you plenty of tips on how to do that. At the 4 level, you can most effectively assess. So the reasons you give are the most logical reasons and the most important reasons when you look at the sources. So starting off are reasons of why you might or might not want to use a source. You can look at the ending of a website. Very quick way to determine whether or not a source should be used. .edu means it's from an educational institution, and that's usually a good thing. Educational institutions want to publish work that is quality. They are publishing work that's well researched from their students, and so that would make it valid to use. .gov is from a government source. Now, the government may be posting information to make itself look good in some cases, in some different types of governments. So depending on what nation you happen to be looking at, it may or may not really be a good thing if it's a .gov. China, for instance, keeps a lot of information private. They want to make sure their country looks good all the time. We have quite stringent laws about what types of information should be released and when in the United States. So most .gov information in the United States should be fairly reliable, especially if it's older information. Newer information they can still withhold if they believe it pertains to security. So new information, if it's something that just happened, it may still not be the most reliable. .org means it's a nonprofit group. Now that may be accurate or it may not. It depends on what the purpose of that organization is and what means they use to achieve it. So use .org with caution, really dig into what the purpose of their group is and how they go about getting it. You can also consider who wrote the information. Is there an author or organization clearly indicated? That's always a good thing. And what can you find out about them? Make sure that you know what their purpose is, and if they're an expert, that can be a really good thing for you. You want information that comes from people who really know their topic well, so look for that information about the author as well. Can you contact the author? That's generally a good sign if they're open to engaging in conversation about their topic. If the site is sponsored by an organization, again, what can you find out about it? What is their purpose? How do they go about it? That's very important. How accurate is the information? Can you tell where the author or organization got their information and how well researched it is? You should see a bibliography. Any research should have some kind of citation that connects to it. It might be in text, it might be after the text, but it should be there. And if it's not, it's probably not a very well researched piece, and maybe you shouldn't be using it either. It could be stuff that they've made up. Does the site itself have any credentials? Do they say if they've earned any awards? Do they say if they are following APA codes for citations? That's a good sign too. Consider the goal of the site. Does it aim to provide information? If so, that's probably pretty good. If they're advertising or persuading, they might not be sharing all the information with you. Beware. Are the goals of the site clearly stated? That's a good sign. You want people to be honest with you. Who's the intended audience? Make sure that you're using information that's actually intended for people like you, high school students who are looking for advanced information. You're not going to get depth of information from a website that's intended for a middle school audience, for example. Is there a lot of flash and bling on the site that may be hiding a lack of real information? Don't let fancy headings and fancy images convince you that it's a good source if other indicators aren't in place. How did you find the site? Did you find it in a search from an educational search engine? We don't have a lot of access to these here, but you will if you head off to college someday. Check those out. You'll usually be able to access them through your college's library webpage. Yahoo or Google? Well, I mean, they're going to pick up any website, so use those with caution. There is Google Scholar. They will actually sort through all of the websites, and they'll find you the ones that are best quality, so you can use that to give yourself a leg up. If you're having a hard time figuring out whether or not a site is good to use, the OWL at Purdue website, their writing lab, is fantastic. There's a web link here that you can follow, or you can just Google OWL at Purdue and find the information that way. I want to take a look at an example. Now, this particular source we've seen referenced in the persuasive essay examples from other writing targets. The author is Jill Barchet. That was easily accessible. It was written in 2014. The title of the article is The Sorry State of Vocational Training, and it was retrieved from educationbythenumbers.org. As I looked at the website that I pulled it from, I saw that the organization was clearly listed as a teacher college at Columbia University. Columbia is a very well-recognized college. The fact that this information is coming from them, and I'm assuming that Jill Barchet is either a student or faculty member there, is a really good sign. As far as accuracy goes, there was no bibliography, but there were in-text citations. I would have loved to have seen the bibliography, but I could at least track down the information, and there were links as well, since it was an online document. Their stated goal for the whole website, Education by the Numbers, is aimed at journalists and researchers. We seek to answer the question of when and whether data can improve education. Well, this website is actually built for researchers in general, so that tells me that their information is probably going to be quite valid. Also, their overall purpose is not to persuade, but simply to use data effectively when they can. And I think that speaks well to their purpose and to the usability of this particular source.